The camera holds its position at the southern edge of a stone forum, facing north toward a mountain that fills half the sky. Tourists move across weathered limestone paving in bright modern clothing, phones raised, while broken columns stand in careful rows around them. Behind it all, the mountain waits, green and quiet, its slopes wrapped in vineyards. Now watch that mountain, and everything in front of it, run backward. The crowds thin and vanish. The guardrails and signage dissolve. The paving stones sink beneath rising soil. Columns collapse into themselves and disappear underground. And the temple at the center folds downward until nothing remains but a bare volcanic ridge covered in dry Mediterranean scrub. The mountain itself changes too, its twin peaks merging into a single, perfect cone, forested and undisturbed, showing no memory of the violence it will one day commit. This bare plateau, overlooking a fertile plain near the Bay of Naples, will become one of the ancient world's wealthiest towns, be annihilated in a single day, forgotten for nearly 2,000 years, and then dug back into the light. Its story begins around the 6th century, before the Common Era, when small Oscan and Etruscan communities recognized what this modest rise of volcanic rock offered: a defensible position above the Sarno River, within reach of trade routes linking Greek colonies to the south with Etruscan territory inland. Herders and farmers built simple homes of timber and packed earth, and a modest, open-air altar rose near the western edge of what would become this square, dedicated to Apollo in the plainest of forms. Foot traffic between coastal settlements wore a rough track through the highland, and that track, more than any wall or building, established the shape of the city that would eventually stand here. For roughly 2.5 centuries, this remained a loose scatter of huts and tens, useful chiefly as a stopping point and a lookout. Its population modest, its buildings temporary, its ambitions small. Then, from the 4th century before the Common Era onward, Samnite hill peoples from the interior extended their control over the Campanian coast, and Pompeii's position turned from convenient to valuable. Wealth from olive oil and wine moving through the harbor funded a Hellenistic building program that transformed the open field into something recognizably urban. Quarried grey tufa stone replaced timber and mud brick. A double tier of colonnades, styled after Doric and Ionic models from the Greek world, rose to enclose the square on 3 sides, turning an unplanned gathering space into a defined civic forum. At its northern end, a formal temple to Jupiter took shape on a raised platform, announcing that this settlement now intended to be taken seriously by its neighbors. Merchants speaking Oscan and Greek haggled over amphorae of wine, and shop fronts opened along the base of the new colonnades. None of this happened by accident. A ruling class, enriched by Mediterranean trade, wanted a public square that matched their standing. And Pompeii's Forum became the physical expression of that ambition, its grey stone geometry replacing the scattered, provisional town that had stood there before. That Samnite achievement did not survive contact with Rome's expanding power. When Pompei joined the losing side in the social war, the Roman general Sulla besieged and eventually absorbed the town. And although the assault itself unfolded beyond this camera's line of sight, its consequences were unmistakable within the forum itself, in cracked masonry and hurried repairs to the grey stone colonnades. What followed was not demolition, but transformation. Rome did not erase Pompeii's Hellenistic forum so much as reclothe it. Under Augustus and his successors, the plain grey stone paving gave way to gleaming white limestone, and marble quarried from the quarries near Carrara began appearing on the Capitolium as the old temple of Jupiter was now reconceived, honoring Jupiter alongside Juno and Minerva, in the manner of Roman state religion. Two triumphal arches, faced in marble and crowned with gilded bronze statues of the imperial family, rose beside the temple, declaring loyalty to Rome in permanent stone. To the east, the Eumarchia building, funded by a priestess of that name, added an ornately carved marble entrance, while the Macellum food market brought covered stalls and a small shrine into the square's northeastern corner. Wheeled traffic was banned from the forum itself, marked by stone blocking posts still visible at its entrances, so that the space became purely pedestrian, reserved for citizens in white togas conducting business, voting, and worship beneath statues of bronze and marble. None of this wealth arrived by chance. Roman colonial status brought administrative importance, and local elites, eager to demonstrate loyalty to the emperor and status among their peers, competed to fund ever more elaborate public monuments. The result, by the middle of the 1st century, was a forum transformed from provincial grey stone into an imperial showcase of gleaming white marble, its architecture now speaking fluent Roman. That polished perfection did not last. On the 5th of February, in the year 62 of the Common Era, a violent earthquake tore through the region, and its effects were immediate and visible here. Columns toppled from the Capitolium's facade. Its pediment collapsed. Cracks spread across the Eumarchia building's marble walls, and honorary statues were thrown from their bases. The tremor was a warning the city's residents could not fully interpret, since nothing in their experience explained why the ground, beneath a supposedly dormant mountain, had begun to move. What followed was 17 years of scaffolding, lime pits, and half-finished repairs. Wooden frameworks wrapped the damaged temple. Masons patched cracked walls with plaster over hastily laid brick. And much of the forum's marble grandeur existed now beside piles of rubble and construction debris. A city visibly still recovering when catastrophe returned in far greater form. In the autumn of the year 79, the sky behind the Temple of Jupiter went suddenly, violently dark. Mount Vesuvius, whose slopes had shown only faint cracks and minor slides in recent years, released the pressure of magma that had been building for centuries. A column of ash and pumice shot more than 20 miles into the atmosphere, spreading into the shape of an umbrella pine and blotting out the midday sun. Within hours, pale pumice stones, the size of grapes, began falling across the forum, first lightly, then in a relentless hail that buried statue bases and accumulated to a depth of several feet. Through that first night, the darkness was broken only by lightning arcing through the ash cloud, and by the glow of collapsing structures under the mounting weight. Then, in the early hours that followed, a superheated cloud of gas and ash, moving at hundreds of miles an hour, swept through the city, tearing away roof tiles, snapping upper columns, and ending, almost instantly, whatever life remained. When the eruption finally subsided, the forum that had taken centuries to build in marble and grey stone had vanished beneath layers of pumice and ash, more than 15 feet deep, its temples, arches and market reduced to a flat, lifeless grey plain. The fine volcanic ash that entombed the city also preserved it, sealing timber, plaster, and even human form in a mold that would remain untouched for nearly 2,000 years. Rain compacted the loose ash into something resembling stone, and within a single generation, this had become simply a plateau of unusually fertile soil, its buried city entirely forgotten. For close to 17 centuries, farmers worked this ground without any awareness of what lay several yards beneath their feet. Grapevines were planted in neat rows across what had once been a forum floor. Olive trees took root where marble columns had stood, and modest stone farmhouses replaced imperial architecture entirely. The area came to be known locally simply as La Cité, an old town, though no one could say what town or where. Occasionally, a farmer's plough struck a fragment of marble or an ancient coin, and it was tossed aside without particular curiosity, treated as ordinary debris rather than evidence of a lost civilization. The mountain behind this plain recovered its own green cover, its shattered summit now settled into a two-part profile. An outer ridge called Monte Somma, enclosing a smaller active cone, though eruptions in these centuries remained minor, leaving only occasional streaks of dark ash on distant slopes. What made this long silence possible was precisely what had destroyed the city in the first place. Volcanic soil, extraordinarily rich in minerals, made this an excellent place to farm, and successive generations of medieval and early modern cultivators saw only agricultural opportunity in ground that concealed one of the ancient world's most complete cities. The contrast could hardly be sharper. A landscape of quiet rural labor sitting directly atop a metropolis, frozen at the exact moment of its destruction, waiting for someone to begin asking the right questions about the ground beneath their feet. Those questions finally arrived in the middle of the 18th century, when engineers working under King Charles III of the Bourbon dynasty began sinking exploratory shafts into this same plain, initially searching less for history than for valuable antiquities to enrich a royal collection. What began as treasure hunting gradually exposed the outline of a buried city. Deep trenches cut through compacted ash, wooden winches hauled baskets of volcanic debris to the surface, and the upper portions of columns belonging to the Temple of Apollo and the Forum's colonnades broke into daylight for the first time since the eruption. Engineers including Carl Weber brought increasing method to the work, mapping locations even as soldiers guarded the site, and carts hauled marble statues and painted wall fragments away to royal collections. European aristocrats on the Grand Tour arrived to watch, astonished at a city reappearing intact from beneath their own vineyards. The excavation was destructive by later standards, tunneling toward decorated rooms and demolishing walls that stood in the way. But it accomplished something unprecedented. It proved that an entire Roman city survived essentially undisturbed beneath centuries of forgotten farmland. Royal curiosity, amplified by the intellectual currents of the Enlightenment, had accidentally launched the systematic recovery of classical antiquity itself. When Italy unified in the following century, that recovery gained a very different kind of leadership. Giuseppe Fiorelli, appointed director of excavations in the 1860s, replaced treasure hunting with genuine archaeological method, working from the surface downward, rather than tunneling toward valuable rooms. Under his direction, narrow rail tracks were laid directly across the Forum to carry cartloads of ash away in far greater volume than earlier winches allowed, and the square was cleared completely down to its original Roman floor level for the first time since the disaster. Fiorelli's most striking innovation exploited a simple observation, where ash had compacted around a decaying body. It left a hollow space in the exact shape of that person at the moment of death. By pouring liquid plaster into these voids, his team produced startlingly lifelike casts of victims in their final postures, displayed within the very ruins where they had died. Railway lines soon connected Naples to the site, bringing Victorian tourists, in growing numbers, to witness a Roman forum returned almost entirely to its ancient dimensions. Its temples and marketplace, once again standing in daylight after nearly 18 centuries underground. The 20th century brought a different kind of destruction. During the Second World War, Allied bombers targeted transportation and military positions across the Naples region, and in September of 1943, explosives struck the forum's southwestern corner, damaging the old antiquarian museum and shattering several columns along the eastern colonnade. It was an odd collision of errors, a 2,000-year-old ruin absorbing the violence of modern warfare. And it forced a new generation of custodians into emergency repair. Under archaeologist Amedeo Maiuri, post-war reconstruction relied on reinforced concrete and steel bracing, materials that stabilized damaged columns quickly, but that later proved chemically harmful to the ancient limestone they were meant to protect. Vesuvius itself erupted one final time in 1944, sending a brief plume skyward before settling into the dormancy it maintains today. A further earthquake in 1980, centered in the nearby Irpinia region, opened new cracks in the Capitolium's walls, adding another layer of injury to a site already carrying the scars of both ancient catastrophe and modern conflict. Recognition of these accumulating threats eventually produced a more coordinated response. Designation as a World Heritage Site in the late 1990s, followed by substantial European funding through what became known as the Great Pompeii Project, brought to contemporary conservation science to bear on the forum for the first time. Corroding post-war concrete has been progressively replaced with lime-based mortars compatible with ancient masonry. Elevated walkways in steel and treated wood now protect fragile paving from millions of footsteps, and laser scanning and drone survey equipment monitor the site's condition with a precision the bourbon excavators could never have imagined. Visitors today move through the forum along carefully engineered paths, phones raised toward the same columns that once stood clothed in dazzling white marble, then vanished under ash, then waited centuries beneath vineyards before returning, piece by piece, to daylight. Evening light now settles across the same stones where this journey began, gold and low, casting long shadows from broken columns that have stood, in one form or another, for more than 2,000 years. Somewhere beneath this pavement lie traces of Oscan huts and Samnite grey stone, buried under Roman marble that was itself buried under volcanic ash, then farmed, then excavated, then bombed, then restored. Every layer remains present in this single field of view, even when only the uppermost is visible to the eye. The mountain that destroyed this city in a single catastrophic day still rises quietly behind it, dormant but never entirely forgotten, a permanent reminder of the force that both ended this place and preserved it. What makes this ground remarkable is not simply that a Roman town once stood here, but that its destruction proved, in the end, to be a kind of protection, sealing daily life at a precise moment, rather than allowing it to erode gradually into unrecognizable ruin. Farmers who once planted vines over a buried forum, engineers who first broke through ash into marble corridors, and visitors who now walk elevated paths above the same paving stones are all, in their own way, participants in the same continuous story, one in which a single place has been buried, forgotten, unearthed and reimagined again and again without ever fully disappearing.